If you run a team, then chances are you've organised or attended training. Anything from specific skill models, systems and technical training, or generalised interpersonal development concepts like high performance or communications or mindfulness. And if you're like most organisations who invest in training, you're probably wasting your money. Big call? Keep watching to find out why this happens and what you can do to avoid it. Ahoy, Peter here from Brighter Training with another video from our Educational Neuroscience series where we apply learning theories and educational neuroscience principles to business contexts. And this time I'm looking at why most training programs run in corporate land do not actually result in genuine learning or behavioural change, why you're throwing your money away and actually demotivating your team further, and the neuroscience that you need to understand to make better decisions in the future. Now, why do we coach and train our teams? It's because we want to change a behaviour, improve performance, or provide skills. And corporate training is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when you add in educational institutions, then that number skyrockets. Then consider the cost of people managers spending up to 70% of their time, ideally, in direct development initiatives, and then HR teams focused on organisational developments. And we can see how seriously it is taken. And it should be. Skills, knowledge and behaviours are all in one interconnected cycle with culture, performance and the achievement of business strategies. And yet, research, such as that done by Ebbinghaus, suggests that most of our memories of an event are lost within 24 hours, and upward of 90% is gone within a week. And that's just the recall of information. Now add to that a new skill or habit takes time to develop, and it isn't 21 days as most people believe, but it's an average of about 66 days, ranging from 18 all the way through to 254 days. So, for example, you want to train your leaders to coach better and to foster a better culture built on trust and respect. And you want them to be able to improve the performance of their teams so that their productivity and quality improves. So you invest $30,000 in a coaching program, and that doesn't include the wages and the staff time away from their actual job, and then within a week, 90% of that content is forgotten. Then nobody practices, and the new skills and habits aren't integrated anyway. So your return on investment is, best case, zero. And you're probably down $30,000 because it didn't have a measurable impact on performance or behavioural change. Most of the positives that we perceive from the training that we invest in are generalised. So for example, people reporting that they found it interesting on a feedback form, or it's a form of sunk cost fallacy. Because we spent money on it, we need to find evidence as to why it was worthwhile. And I use the term evidence very loosely. So how do we go from awareness of knowledge to integrating it to make it a true learning? Now that should be the multi-billion-dollar question that we consider when organising training initiatives. In a previous video, we explored 4 key things that the brain is hardwired to do, and essentially it comes down to survival. Now in humans, the central and peripheral nervous systems and the brain allow understanding and manipulation of our environment to circumvent internal and external limitations to our evolution. And one advantage that helps us survive is our ability to remember and to apply learning to new situations to predict outcomes and respond to threats. And this is interesting and vital from both a survival point of view and for personal and professional development. Learning and memory occur on a physiological level, and our experiences rewire the brain to provide access and application of new skills and knowledge. So let's consider the 3 main memory systems: sensory, working, and long-term. So we start with our sensory memory. This one only lasts for about 3 seconds and then it's gone. Now they say that you take in 11 million bits of information per second through your nervous system, and your sensory memory is responsible for sifting through that and deciding what to keep. Then we have our working memory, and that's a type of short-term memory where we can temporarily store data for immediate use. It's the memory system you use, say, when you're following a recipe in a cookbook. You tend to only hold on to 1 or 2 steps or measures at a time. Now, George Miller popularised the idea that out of those 11 million bits of information that are coming in, we can only hold 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information at any given time. Now, today that number has been reduced to 4 plus or minus 1, and if you're under a lot of stress, it can actually drop to 0. So you can see why it is so important for us to be able to store relevant information long term and for our brains to automate so many processes because we just don't have the conscious processing capacity. Now, since there is way too much data coming in for us to process consciously, we need a way of filtering it. Think of it like searching the internet. There's billions of bits of data out there, but you get what you search for. Hence, filters are your attention and focus, and the more you search for specific things or access certain memories, then the more those connections strengthen in the brain. Like when you search for something online and the advertising starts to shift to match your search history. And this is normal and it's a necessary process. We need to automate most of our thoughts and responses since we just don't have the capacity to assess everything consciously. However, if you always search for the same things, phrase things in the same way, your bias tends to result in you getting exactly what you expect or what you already believe. And we rarely stop to ask why we think or act the way we do. Is it the most efficient, the most productive, or healthy? Do you even know why you have those beliefs in the first place? And the more you repeat the pattern, the stronger the pathway in the brain becomes. Now, finally, we have long-term memory, and that's where the information is stored for later use. What's interesting here from a development perspective is the relationship between working memory and long-term memory. So when you learn something new, you hold it in your working memory to apply or play with immediately. Now, eventually, with enough practice and repetition, that information gets stored as a long-term memory. And the more you revisit and apply that content, the stronger the pathway becomes in the brain. It's a case of practice makes permanent. Now, once it's in the long-term memory and it has a good pathway to it, then you can access and apply the content without a second thought. It's the basic concept of system 1 and 2 thinking, or the difference between conscious and unconscious competence. But this is where it gets really important from a leadership perspective. So there is a huge difference between memorizing and learning. Now, when it comes to return on investment and genuine development, you need to define and measure the transition from memorization to true learning. It's the difference between being able to just recall something and being able to unconsciously do it well, or having evidence that the content of the training has led to a permanent behavioural change. And I'll give you an example. I've attended many training sessions for new or middle management on topics like coaching. The managers are exposed to some theories, a simple and memorable model, perhaps something like the GROW model, and then practice role plays to demonstrate their competency. Then they walk away thinking that they're coaches. However, I guarantee that whenever I've conducted a training needs analysis and a skill audit, while most of the participants can recall attending the training, and perhaps they can even recall the model's acronym, they cannot give me any detail. And practical assessments show that it's essentially a rote response. And remember how much we can hold in our working memory. So suppose a coach fills their working memory with rote learned coaching questions and a 4-step model. Now, in that case, they are neurologically unable to take in and respond to nonverbal cues, language patterns, emotional responses, or higher order analysis of what their coaching subject is saying. And this occurs with sales training, product training, actually any training you care to mention. People memorize long enough to pass the test, but if that knowledge isn't reviewed, applied, and practiced, then it will not result in long-term memory and will not result in behavioural change. And that means that it will not result in learning. And if you're going to bring people in just for an interesting session that won't go anywhere and that won't support behavioural change, then you might as well save the time and money and just order some pizza and beer and have a fun bonding session, which could probably have a better performance outcome than poorly planned training. While short-term memory and behaviour is the first step in the training process, we need to consider long-lasting effects, and that's what makes the difference, drives results, and provides the return on investment. And for that, there needs to be an infrastructure to support positive neuroplasticity. So at its core, learning is about neuroplasticity. It's the recognition that for content presented in training to become a learned skill and not just a series of facts that can be delivered to pass a test, then it means that the brain needs to change. And I can't emphasize this enough. Learning means brain change, and that takes time and effort. Think of the example of a child learning to tie their shoelaces. The repetition and practice results in the same neurons firing, which physically changes the brain to allow the skill to be done easily. It's a simple, single skill that still takes time to learn. Now, the same goes when learning to tie a tie. If you haven't done it for a while, it can be clunky and difficult. Now, I haven't tied a tie in about 3 years, and this is me trying to do it just for this video. So eventually I'll track down the memory and the skill that I had and it'll all work out. However, I couldn't tie it for someone else and I couldn't explain how to do it. So I learned the skill through many hours of repetition over time, and it took time and effort to master. However, teach me a new method and I'm back to square one. And if I stop using that skill, the neural pathway will shrink. Interestingly, once you know something and it becomes automated and part of your physiology, it is much harder to change it. So if someone shows you a new way of tying a tie or shoelaces, then that difficulty usually results in you just reverting back to what you know. And this is important when it comes to learning and change, especially when in business, the reason why we do training is usually to change what people are doing. Now, once people know how to do something, changing their approach is even more challenging than just teaching them something brand new. Now, how likely is it that people will learn in one session? I think the best that you can say is that people become aware in one session, and then they forget the majority of the content a week later. All they really take away is that there's perhaps a different way of doing it. Now, without the need, experience, benefit, repetition, support, safety, then the brain won't change, and therefore neither will the behavior. It's like watching YouTube videos. The content makes sense, it makes us think, but it's unlikely to change our behavior unless we apply it over time. So it's the illusion of learning. At best, it's basic memorizing. So the key takeout here, memorizing isn't learning. Learning is about the development of an unconscious skill. It's about behavioural change. It's the ability to apply content practically. Even if people repeat the content repeatedly, while that may result in a long-term memory, it still won't result in a behavioural change because that takes practice, time, and rewiring of the brain. And there is no way to cheat that process. If a trainer comes in and says to you that the learning outcome after one day is X, then I say that they're either deluding themselves or they're lying. They could say temporarily people will be able to say or do X, but if the knowledge isn't present within the organisation, and if the content isn't reviewed and applied regularly, and if the staff don't use it daily, there won't be a learning outcome. It's like hiring a personal trainer to do the exercise for you, or attending one of those introductory sessions at the gym and expecting to not only understand the techniques and the systems and the theories, but also walk away with improvements to your health and physique.
Sir, have you had enough exercise for this morning?
No. Let's go another 20 miles.
Our thoughts, actions, and environment literally change our brains, and our brains, in turn, control our filters and our behaviours, which create our results and our experiences in life. So for true learning to occur, we need to invest time and effort into integrating the data that we take from awareness of an idea in order to turn it into an unconscious demonstration of skill or behavioural change. So don't mistake memory for learning. Do you want your teams to be excited to attend training and not roll their eyes because it's another stressful waste of their time that takes them away from their job instead of making their job easier? What makes training painful or effective for you? Let us know in the comments. But if you want a real return on investment and a measurable behavioural change that helps you achieve your personal and professional goals, or if you want to know how to choose the right training solution to your team to meet your strategic goals, And especially if you want to stop wasting time and money on programs that don't do anything, then give us a call to discuss your needs and options. Our contact details can be found in the description below. We specialise in helping you get actual results, and we do that by applying contemporary scientific learning principles. It may be confronting, but it enables you to get what it is that you want. So as always, thanks for watching, have a great day, and we look forward to working with you soon.